Why would God decide to go all the way to babyhood? And is that a little bit, I don't know, beneath him in some ways? Hi, I'm Justin Barrett, president of Blueprint 1543. I'm a former university professor and a psychological scientist. Today, I want to talk about 8-pound, 6-ounce baby Jesus. You know what I'm talking about. Ricky Bobby's favorite Jesus, 8-pound, 6-ounce baby Jesus from Talladega Nights. Is that your favorite Jesus? It is one of my favorite Jesuses. But of course, the famous prayer scene around the table, it's a little irreverent feeling at times because he references how, this is his favorite Jesus because he's omnipotent but doesn't have any words yet, things like that. But actually, I think it's kind of a theologically interesting moment. It gets us thinking. Because there is something perplexing and maybe a little bit scandalous about the idea of the creator of the world putting on human clothes and not just sort of condescending to become a human, but a baby that screams and cries and wets itself, that doesn't know any words. How can an all-knowing God not know any words? Well, it turns out that if we read the Bible carefully in this, there is a developmental process to Jesus. In Luke chapter 2, where we have some of the early life of Jesus recorded, we read that, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature. That is, there's a development going on in Jesus assuming his human nature. Why would God decide to go all the way to babyhood? And is that a little bit, I don't know, beneath him in some ways? Well, it turns out humans are kind of interesting in our infancy. We are, as scientists are quick to point out, kind of born immature, maybe even premature. Think of it this way. We've got such big heads that in order for us to come out of our mothers, that we have to actually be born earlier than the full-sized head. Otherwise, we're going to do her some serious damage as we're coming out. And we need flexible plates in our skulls because of this big old noggin that we've got here. And of course, that big old noggin is part of what makes us human. It makes us great cultural learners. It makes us inventive. It makes us able to acquire tools and all kinds of other things. It enables us to have the kind of sociality that we have, to be able to understand each other's perspectives, to look at each other's minds, to be able to direct each other's attention, to be able to learn language, to do so many things that makes us human, requires big heads, but big heads fully developed the way we see, or at least as fully developed as we see in other animals, would almost certainly kill mothers and the baby too during childbirth. And so we actually need to be born premature, and we are. By the time that other mammals are, having their grandchildren the same number of years, we're just starting school. Or think of this, chimpanzees reach 90% of their adult brain size in their second year of life, when they're about 2 years old. It takes humans 4 times as long to reach the same kind of brain development. We're that slow. So we spend a lot of time as these vulnerable little, sort of mushy little things that can't walk very well, that can't speak very well, and that are so dependent on nurturing of others. And not just usually a mother and maybe a mother and a father, but often a grandparents as well. Children, as we all know, can become the focus of a whole clan of people. There's a lot of investment because babies are so immature for so long and require so much support. And not just in those baby years, but humans don't become fully independent until when? 18, 21, 25, 35? It's becoming later and later. We need each other. That's just part of human development, is to have this long maturational process. But why? What's the benefit of that? Because it requires so much investment of parents, and it leaves the baby so vulnerable to attack. Surely there's got to be some kind of beneficial trade-off, or this wouldn't be a feature of our species. We'd be wiped out because we're so immature for so long. Well, there are benefits, and the benefits are in brain development and learning. It gives us so much time to acquire language, to acquire the particular food preferences, to learn about the plants and animals around us, to acquire the cultural knowledge of our environment that's relevant to us surviving and thriving in that environment. And so actually having this prolonged childhood is of great benefit to us being the kind of animal that we are. And so if God becomes human, and in Christian theology we teach that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. For him to be fully human, he needed to go through the fully human developmental process as well. So he could fully develop the language, the cultural habits, the knowledge of his community there in first century, what we now call Israel. He needed all of that time to learn all of those particulars and to be invested in by a family. A family then who actually got to love and care for God in the flesh in a very direct kind of way. And for Jesus to be in that kind of interaction with humans, for him to be fully human, he needed to experience being nurtured as a child, to being a big brother to his other siblings, including James, who we know most about, his brother James, who ends up being one of the early martyrs of the church and the author of one of the books of the New Testament, who was so devoted to his older brother, strangely, being God in the flesh, that he actually died over that belief. So there's something powerful and complex about Jesus having been a baby. And that's why I actually find the idea of the 8-pound, 6-ounce baby Jesus pretty interesting and attractive, and one of the marvelous and sort of wondrous parts of the Christmas story. So for Jesus to fully embrace humanity, he needed to fully embrace this distinctive part of our humanity, which is this slow maturation, and starting with being a baby and all that that entails. But he also then gives us maybe a metaphor or a pattern for how we then become like him. He became like us by being a baby. We become like him also through a slow process beginning with great immaturity that then goes on and on. The Bible refers to this as being born again. We then are sort of born into being like Jesus, and it's going to take us a long time to mature as well. And maybe that's actually an important part of the process. And so when we read that Jesus wants us to come to him like children, maybe he's already given us kind of his own gesture in that direction, and he's met us halfway there. So those are the thoughts I wanted to share with you. If you want to read more about 8-pound, 6-ounce baby Jesus, you will find a text of some of these reflections, among others, related to it in an Advent devotional guide that Science for the Church has published. And so I encourage you to check that out. We'll drop a link in to the comments area. If there are other things that you'd like to talk about, like to hear me talk about, please leave us comments, like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.